Welcome to Strategies for the Inclusive Classroom, Section 6, The Underachiever Introduction. In Section 1, The Diverse Classroom, we examined the components of an inclusive classroom and discussed ways to build a community of diverse learners. In Section 2, Learning Targets, we focused on writing learning targets that align to the standards and provide learning at multiple levels of thinking. In Section 3, Memory and Learning, we focused on the strategies educators can utilize in the inclusive classroom to engage learners, organize and encode information, and enrich learning. In Section 4, Literacy and Numeracy, we focused on English language learners and students with literacy and numeracy challenges. In Section 5, Behavior, Attention, and Organization, we focused on students with autism spectrum disorders, executive functioning challenges, and attention deficit and hyperactivity disorders. In Section 6, The Underachievers, we will examine the various types of underachievers in the inclusive classroom. Remember, the first 3 sections laid the foundation for our course and presented strategies that are effective for all learners. In Sections 4, 5, and now 6, we continue our discussion of the special populations and students with specific challenges. Please turn to page 189, Section 6, The Underachievers, and read the quotation on this page. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. This quotation speaks to the importance of motivating our underachievers. We must analyze the complex issue behind their underachiever behaviors and seek solutions for lighting the fire of successful learning. Engaging and motivating learners is important for all students in the classroom, but it takes insight and nuance to engage and motivate the underachievers. Please turn to page 190, Section 6, Learning Targets. The learning targets for Section 6 are: I can analyze and differentiate the characteristics of various types of underachievers and select appropriate strategies to enhance learning. Internalize course concepts and strategies and make connections to the classroom. Design a lesson that utilizes collaborative teaching and universally meets the needs of all learners in the inclusive classroom. Prior to learning the information in Section 6, what value would you place on your proficiency with the learning target that addresses underachievers? If you had $100 to place on this learning target to value your knowledge and expertise, what value would you assess it at this point? You can value the learning target from $1 through $100. You will have an opportunity to reassess the value of your knowledge and expertise at the end of this section. The overview mind map at the bottom of page 190 shows the activities you will experience in order to achieve these learning targets. We will examine 6 types of underachievers: the distant, passive, dependent, and defiant underachiever, as well as gifted and talented underachievers and the shutdown learner. We will close the section with the success showcase and time for you to design an inclusive lesson. Please turn to page 191, Research Quotations. Read in the research and highlight the strategies that have been shown to light the fire in your students. What strategies did you highlight? Challenging work and balance with their skills, relevant content, control over learning with choice, high expectations, challenging students to think, teaching a growth mindset, focusing on strengths, interests, and goals. Remember, as you will find when we delve into the characteristics of each of the underachievers, we are dealing with very complex individuals. Motivating the underachiever and lighting the fire to learn involves a multi-leveled approach in both developmental and academic strategies. It is important to engage all learners, but if we can get the at-risk students involved in learning, we impact learning in a huge way. For this next activity, please find the revised activity directions and scenario card in Canvas, Module Section 6, Do You Know Me? Discussion area. Please take a moment to think about the underachievers in your classroom. Do you know these students? Take a look at the student scenario statements in this Google Doc in the discussion area. Think of someone you know or have had in class who fits the description. Here are the student scenarios. Please take a moment to review them. Condescending Carlos and manipulative Max. Sick Sarah and cooperative Chloe. Helpless Hiru and disappearing Danielle. Lonely Leo and roaming Roni. Dropout Dylan and difficult Dominique. Tuned out Tony, creative Carlina. What insights emerged from your reflection of these students? Did you realize that you have a lot of these students in your classroom and they demand a huge amount of your time and attention? Did you reflect on how teachers might not be aware of all of the personal issues underlying the student behaviors? In essence, we must spend time getting to know our students. Did you realize that their issues are very complex and maybe more than academics? Sometimes we get so focused on the academics that we miss the issues that also need to be addressed. How can you use the Do You Know Me activity in your content areas? Could you use it to describe different characters in a story to spur a discussion? Could you use it to describe different historical or current event individuals and then move into a discussion? Could you use it as a review activity to see if students can recognize the person described? Remember, these student scenarios give us a small insight into some of the underachievers in our classroom. Our underachievers are like an onion. You have to peel back the layers in order to get to all of the issues that drive what we see on the surface. Let's continue our discussion of the underachievers. Each day in the inclusive classroom, educators face more than learners with exceptional needs. They also encounter gifted students who are not appropriately challenged, underachievers who do not perform to their potential, and shutdown learners who exhibit apathy regarding school and learning. Although these learners have characteristics unique to their domain, they also have many characteristics in common. Our learning target as we examine the underachievers is, I can analyze and differentiate the characteristics of various types of underachievers and select appropriate strategies to enhance learning. Please go to Canvas Modules Section 6, Who Are the Underachievers discussion area for this activity. Please turn to page 192, Who Are the Underachievers? Reflect on or discuss your own personal classroom views and what you have observed regarding the gifted underachiever, the underachiever, and the shutdown learner. List the characteristics you have observed for each type of underachiever. Use the editable Google Doc in the discussion area. Discuss what these three learners have in common, and list the commonalities of these three underachievers. What did you list as characteristics of the gifted underachiever? Superior and condescending, like he or she is above and beyond what we are doing. Perpetually bored, very creative and divergent thinker, challenges the teacher during class discussions, does not need the same repetition and practice as other students, tends to be a perfectionist and self-critical. What did you list as characteristics of the underachiever? Does the person not perform up to his or her potential? Does he or she act perpetually bored? Does he or she cause classroom management issues? Does the student sleep in class and doesn't turn work in? Does the student want you to enable her and think for her? Does the student seem very disorganized and off in his or her own world? And does the student come to school for social reasons only? What did you list as characteristics of the shutdown learner? Is that learner extremely apathetic and hates school? Does that student seem to excel in elective classes and is very creative? Can the student be hooked into participating by certain activities? Does the learner act invisible and want to be left alone? Does the student ever have supplies or books needed to learn? Is the student absent a lot, especially on test days? And does the student usually submit incomplete work when and if the work is turned in at all? What commonalities did you list among these three types of underachievers? Do they not work up to potential? Do they seem bored and disengaged with school? Do they have talents and strengths that may go undiscovered and are underused? Do they use manipulative behaviors and defense mechanisms? Remember, your group probably found more characteristics specific to each learner type than commonalities. The underachievers tend to be very complex individuals. They tend to have both developmental issues and academic issues. The better we understand the various types of underachievers, the more effective we can be in selecting appropriate strategies that lead these learners to success. Let's learn more about the various types of underachievers. The underachievers are sprinkled throughout every classroom. They are perpetually bored, daydream, lose assignments, forget supplies, don't follow directions, and tend to be disorganized and apathetic learners. Yet the underlying causes of underachievement are as complex as each of these diverse types of learners. You will now take some time to examine each type of underachiever in more depth. Our learning target is, I can analyze and differentiate the characteristics of various types of underachievers and select appropriate strategies to enhance learning. Please go to Canvas Modules Section 6, Sages on the Stage, where you will find the activity directions and your new group members. Please turn to page 194, Sages on the Stage, where you will find the activity directions. On the top of the page, you will see listed the different types of underachievers we will examine. Again, please go to the Canvas discussion area to find your group members and the revised activity directions. You will work individually and read the pages indicated. As you read, make notations of important points using the graphic organizer on Articles page 11, Analyzing the Underachiever, and page 203 for the Shutdown Learner. Note, there is a graphic organizer located by the information. However, I would like to remind you that the pages are perforated in your manual and they can remove the graphic organizer and place it next to the content you are reading if desired. Notice that the graphic organizer has one column for recording developmental characteristics found in the reading. Developmental characteristics deal with personality, emotional maturity, and corresponding behaviors. The second column is where you will list school characteristics. School characteristics identify the type of student you observe at school and the corresponding behaviors. The third column is where you will record any strategies given in the reading to addressing this type of underachiever. After reading the information, you will think of someone you know who correlates to the underachiever you studied and complete the last row in the graphic organizer, "Let me tell you about." You have read the information about your underachiever and completed the graphic organizer. You will now have an opportunity to discuss what you read with your group, condense your ideas, and prepare a presentation. When the members of your group have finished reading, work as a group and discuss your underachiever. Share the information on your graphic organizers and share the stories and personal examples you wrote. Again, you will be working in the discussion area for this activity. As a group, you will want to create a visual that contains 5 developmental characteristics, 5 school characteristics, 5 strategies. For each group, you should have 2 sages on the stage. One sage will present the information about your underachiever using the visual created by the group. One sage will tell a story about someone who is that type of underachiever. We look forward to seeing your presentations. We will now have each of the sages on the stage present the information about each type of underachiever. Please record the information presented by each of the sages on the stage on the corresponding graphic organizer. After the presentations, you will be able to record information you have missed during the presentation. Please turn to page 195, the distant underachiever. Again, you will also find the presentations in the discussion area for the different groups. Use page 195 to record important points as the sages on the stage discuss the distant underachiever. After the presentation, please take a moment to review this slide on the distant underachiever. What thoughts, comments, or questions do you have about the distant underachiever? These students may be very hard to build a relationship with in class. You may have to be very persistent in a non-threatening way. Were you familiar with the emotional and developmental aspect that underlies this type of achiever? Do you understand why focusing solely on academic intervention will not be effective for this underachiever? Our next presentations are the passive underachiever. Please turn to page 196, the passive underachiever. Use this page to record important points as the sages on the stage discuss the passive underachiever. Again, you will find the presentations in the discussion area. After you have reviewed the presentation, please take a moment to review the information on the passive underachiever. What thoughts, comments, or questions do you have about the passive underachiever? Do these students have a way of being invisible? You think they understand and are working, then sometimes they turn in assignments incomplete. Is it really hard not to jump in and rescue or enable this student because they are likable? These students can be like chameleons. They may say what they think you want to hear. Our next presentations are by the dependent underachiever group. Please turn to page 197, the dependent underachiever. Use this page to record important points as the sages on the stage discuss the dependent underachiever. After you have reviewed the presentation, please take a moment to read over the dependent underachiever notes. What thoughts, comments, or questions do you have about the dependent underachiever? Does their helplessness seem to be unintentional, which is why people come to their rescue? However, you may now understand that it is very intentional and manipulative. This is the true Peter Pan complex. They may not want to grow up. These students are not overtly defiant. They quietly rebel and just may not do anything. Our next presentations will be about the defiant underachiever. Please turn to page 198, the defiant underachiever. Use this page to record important points as the sages on the stage discuss the defiant underachiever. After you have reviewed their presentation, please take a moment to look over the notes on this slide regarding the defiant underachiever. What thoughts, comments, or questions do you have about the defiant underachiever? Do we sometimes tend to write these kids off and let them fail because they are so defiant, whereas we may come to the rescue of the passive or dependent underachievers? Have you noticed that even the smallest criticism or suggestion will set them off? Did you notice they may not like being told what to do, but they don't do anything unless they are told? Our next presentations, the gifted and talented underachievers. Please turn to page 199, Gifted and Talented Underachievers. Use this page to record important points as the sages on the stage discuss gifted and talented underachievers. After you've reviewed their presentation, please take a moment to review these notes and compare and contrast with the notes you already took. What thoughts, comments, or questions do you have about the gifted and talented underachiever? Have you noticed that these students like to challenge the teacher and need to develop skills in disagreeing politely? Have you found that if you give their opinions more credence than the others in the class, it only feeds their superiority and fault-finding in others? Do you believe that you do these students a disservice if you do not provide learning opportunities that keep them appropriately challenged? The next presentation is the Shutdown Learner Group. Please turn to page 200, the Shutdown Learner. Use this page to record important points as the sages on the stage discuss the Shutdown Learner. After you've reviewed their presentation, please take a moment to look over these notes on the Shutdown Learner. What thoughts, comments, or questions do you have about the Shutdown Learner? Did you have a student like this in class who just came alive whenever you did creative, hands-on activities, but would never turn in written homework? Did you have a student who would draw amazing artwork during instruction? Did you realize that he was doing that to help him pay attention during the lecture? Was it insightful for you to understand that curriculum and instruction tends to focus on the opposite of the strengths of this student? As we have found during our discussion of the underachievers, the issues are very complex. It is important that we have effective academic interventions that help remediate and enhance needed skills. However, motivating these students has a developmental and emotional component as well, which must be addressed simultaneously if we are to convince the underachiever that success is possible. Understanding the many dimensions of the underachievers helps us accomplish our learning target. I can analyze and differentiate the characteristics of various types of underachievers and select appropriate strategies to enhance learning. The rest of this session will be for you to work independently through the material. There will now be narrated PowerPoints on Canvas Modules Section 6 to walk you through the rest of today's activities. Please be sure to post the activities in the discussion area or submitted assignment area before our next class. Remember, even though these activities are not graded, they must be completed to report your successful completion to your university partner. Immediately after this introduction, please go to Canvas Modules Section 6, The Underachiever. Your first video will explore the sages on the stage, which will be an opportunity for you to learn more about the different types of underachievers. Your second video will demonstrate the connections between what we learned this section and how we can apply it to our classrooms. Finally, we will explore Assessment 8, which has you providing strategies for those students identified as underachievers. Don't forget to check off that you have completed all section activities, including your section reflection. Let the good times begin. If you have any questions while you work, please call or email your instructor. This concludes our Section 6 introduction. Please continue to Modules Section 6, The Underachiever, Problem-Solving Process to Enhance Learning.